The concert hall was quiet that Tuesday evening. Most of the staff had already gone home, but she was still there, doing what she did every day, tuning pianos. Her name was Lisa, and for the past 3 years, this had been her life. Walking into empty performance halls, adjusting keys, making sure every note sounded exactly as it should. She loved this job, even though most people didn't really notice her work. When a piano sounded beautiful during a concert, the audience clapped for the pianist. Nobody thought about the person who spent hours making sure that piano was perfect, but Lisa didn't mind. Being around music, even if she wasn't the one performing, was enough for her. Or at least that's what she told herself. That evening, she had just finished tuning the grand piano on stage. It was a beautiful instrument, one of the best in the city. She always took extra care with this particular piano, because it was used for the most important performances. As she worked, she did what she always did, played a few notes here and there to check her work. Nothing fancy, just simple scales and chords to make sure everything sounded right. But then, without really thinking about it, she let her fingers linger on the keys a bit longer. She played a short melody, something soft and gentle. It felt good. It had been so long since she'd really played, and for just a moment, she let herself forget where she was and why she was there. That's when she heard the voice. "Excuse me, what exactly do you think you're doing?" Lisa's hands froze. She looked up to see a man standing at the edge of the stage, staring at her with a look that made her stomach sink. She recognized him immediately. Everyone in the music world knew who he was. Daniel Richardson was one of the most famous pianists in the country. He had performed in the biggest concert halls around the world, won numerous awards, and had a reputation for being absolutely brilliant at what he did. He also had a reputation for being difficult. "I'm sorry. I was just..." Lisa started to explain, quickly pulling her hands away from the piano. "Just what?" "Playing around on an instrument that costs more than you probably make in a year." Daniel walked closer, his expensive shoes clicking against the wooden stage floor. He was dressed impeccably, as always, in a tailored suit that probably cost more than Lisa's entire wardrobe. "I was tuning it," she said quietly, feeling her face grow hot. "I was just checking to make sure everything sounded correct." Daniel laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Checking? And what exactly would you know about how a concert piano should sound?" Lisa felt something twist in her chest. She wanted to say so much, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she just looked down at her hands, still hovering over the keys. "Look," Daniel said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I'm sure you're very good at whatever it is you do. Tuning, adjusting, whatever. But playing the piano? That's not the same thing. That takes years of training, dedication, sacrifice. You can't just sit down and pretend you're a pianist because you know how to turn a few pegs." By now, a few other people had started to gather. Lisa could see some of the hall staff peeking from backstage, drawn by Daniel's raised voice. Her supervisor was there too, looking uncomfortable but not saying anything. Nobody ever really stood up to Daniel Richardson. He was too important, too famous, too valuable to the concert hall. "I wasn't pretending anything," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. She started gathering her tools, wanting nothing more than to disappear, but Daniel wasn't finished. "You know what the problem is these days? Everyone thinks they're special. Everyone thinks they're talented. But real talent? Real skill? That takes more than just touching a piano. It takes a lifetime of work. People like you tune pianos. People like me, we play them. There's a difference, and you need to understand that." His assistant, a young woman who always followed him around with a tablet and a stressed expression, shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Richardson, maybe we should start the rehearsal." "In a minute," he cut her off. He was still looking at Lisa, and there was something almost cruel in his eyes. "I'm just trying to help her understand reality. It's better to know your place than to embarrass yourself by reaching for something you'll never achieve." Lisa felt like she couldn't breathe. The concert hall suddenly felt too small, too hot. All those eyes watching her, all those people hearing Daniel tell her she wasn't good enough, that she didn't belong. She carefully closed the piano lid, her hands shaking slightly. "I apologize for disturbing you," she managed to say, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "The piano is ready for your rehearsal." She picked up her toolkit and walked off the stage, her head held high even though inside she felt like she was falling apart. As she passed the small group of staff members, she could see the pity in their eyes. That somehow made it worse. She didn't want anyone's pity. Behind her, she heard Daniel laughing again, saying something to his assistant about people having delusions of grandeur. The words followed her all the way to the back hallway where she finally stopped and leaned against the cool wall, closing her eyes. This wasn't the first time someone had dismissed her. In the 3 years she'd worked here, plenty of musicians had barely acknowledged her existence. She was just part of the background like the curtains or the chairs, but nobody had ever been quite this cruel about it. Nobody had ever made her feel quite this small. The worst part? He didn't know anything about her. He didn't know her story. He just saw a woman in simple work clothes tuning a piano, and he made all his assumptions based on that. To him, she was nobody. Someone who didn't deserve to even touch the keys of a piano like that, let alone play it. Lisa opened her eyes and looked down at her hands. They were rougher now than they used to be, with small calluses from working with tools and strings every day. But underneath all that, they were still the same hands that had once done extraordinary things. Things that Daniel Richardson, for all his fame and talent, knew nothing about. She thought about going home, about putting this day behind her and pretending it never happened. That's what she'd been doing for years now, hiding, staying small, keeping her head down. It was easier that way, safer, less painful. But as she stood there in that hallway, something stirred inside her, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. Daniel's words had been meant to hurt her, to put her in her place. But instead they'd awakened something else, a question that she'd been afraid to ask herself for years. Could she still do it? After everything that had happened, after all this time, was she still capable of being that person she used to be? Lisa pushed herself away from the wall and walked toward the exit. Her shift was over anyway, but as she left the concert hall that evening, she wasn't thinking about Daniel Richardson's cruelty. She was thinking about something else entirely, something that both terrified and excited her in equal measure. Maybe it was time to find out who she really was. And maybe it was time to show the world that sometimes the people you overlook are the ones with the most extraordinary stories to tell. Lisa didn't sleep well that night. She kept replaying the scene in her head, hearing Daniel's words over and over again. People like you tune pianos. People like me play them. Each time the memory surfaced, it stung a little less and made her a little angrier. She lived in a small apartment about 30 minutes from the concert hall. It wasn't much. Just a bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room that barely fit a couch and a table. But it was hers, and after everything she'd been through, having her own space meant something. What dominated the room, though, was the old upright piano against the wall. It had belonged to her parents. The wood was scratched and faded, some of the keys stuck occasionally, and it desperately needed tuning. But Lisa couldn't bring herself to fix it. That piano held too many memories, and touching it, really touching it, would mean facing things she'd spent years trying to avoid. That night, though, she found herself standing in front of it. She hadn't really played it in 5 years. Oh, she'd press a key here and there, checking if it still worked, but she never actually sat down and played. Not like she used to. Her fingers traced the dusty surface of the closed lid. Underneath that lid were keys that knew her better than most people ever had. Keys that had felt her joy, her frustration, her dreams, and her heartbreak. She sat down on the worn bench and opened the lid slowly, like she was opening a door to her past. The keys looked back at her, yellowed with age but still familiar. She placed her right hand on them, feeling the cool smoothness beneath her fingertips. Then she tried to play. Her right hand cramped immediately. The fingers didn't move the way they should, the way they used to. She grimaced and pulled her hand back, flexing her fingers. The nerve damage was still there, just like it had been since the accident. Some days were better than others, but it never really went away. The accident. Even thinking about it made her chest tight. It had happened 6 years ago. She was 22 years old and on top of the world. Well, on top of her world anyway. She'd been accepted to one of the best music schools in the country when she was just 15. By 20, she was performing in competitions internationally. By 22, she had offers from orchestras, recording companies, and concert halls around the world. Lisa Chen was going to be somebody. Everyone said so. Her parents had sacrificed everything for her music education. Her father had worked 2 jobs. Her mother had cleaned houses, and they'd poured every dollar they could spare into piano lessons, competitions, travel expenses. They were immigrants who believed in the American dream, and Lisa was going to be their proof that hard work and talent could overcome anything. She remembered the night of the accident so clearly. She'd just finished a performance, one of her best ever. The standing ovation, the flowers, the congratulations. She was flying high, feeling invincible. Her teacher had told her that a major orchestra wanted to discuss a performance contract. Her whole future was unfolding exactly as she'd dreamed. She was driving home, still buzzing with excitement, when the other car ran a red light. She didn't even see it coming. One moment she was thinking about which piece she'd perform with the orchestra, and the next moment there was the screech of metal, the explosion of glass, and then darkness. She woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed. Her parents were there, looking exhausted and terrified. The doctors explained that she'd been lucky, no brain damage, no spinal injuries. She would walk again, talk again, live a normal life. But her right hand was another story. The nerves had been severely damaged. They'd done surgery, they'd done everything they could, but the prognosis was clear. She would regain some function with physical therapy, but the fine motor control needed for professional piano performance, that was likely gone forever. Lisa remembered the moment that reality sank in, not when the doctors told her, not when she saw the scars and bandages on her hand, but later, when she tried to play a simple scale on the hospital's therapy piano and her fingers wouldn't cooperate. They felt foreign, disconnected, like they belonged to someone else. That was the moment Lisa Chen, the rising star, the prodigy, the girl with the golden future, disappeared. The years that followed were dark. Physical therapy was painful and frustrating. Every tiny improvement felt like a mockery of what she'd once been capable of. She dropped out of music school. She stopped returning calls from her teacher, from the orchestra representatives, from fellow musicians. She couldn't bear to be around that world anymore when she was no longer part of it. Her parents tried to be supportive, but she could see the grief in their eyes. All their sacrifices, all their hopes, gone in one terrible moment. Her father died of a heart attack 2 years after the accident. The doctors said it was just one of those things, but Lisa knew better. The stress, the disappointment, the extra work hours he'd taken to pay her medical bills, it had all taken its toll. Her mother followed less than a year later. Cancer. By the time they found it, it was too late. Lisa was left alone with medical, debt, grief, and hands that could no longer do the only thing she'd ever been truly great at. She'd taken the piano tuning job out of desperation. She needed work, and at least it kept her connected to music in some small way. It was like being a ghost haunting her own former life. She could be near the things she loved, but never truly part of it again. Sitting at her parents' old piano now, Lisa tried again. She played slowly, carefully, working through a simple exercise. Her right hand protested, the movements awkward and sometimes painful. But something was different tonight. Maybe it was Daniel's cruelty lighting a fire in her. Maybe it was just that she was tired of hiding. She kept playing. For an hour, then 2, then 3. Yes, her hand cramped. Yes, she made mistakes. Yes, it sounded nothing like it used to. But underneath all that, something else was emerging. A different kind of music. Not the technical perfection of her youth, but something deeper. Something that carried the weight of loss and survival. When she finally stopped, it was past midnight. Her right hand ached, but it was a good ache. The kind that came from actually using muscles instead of protecting them. She looked at the framed photos on the wall, old concert programs from when she was younger, pictures of her with her parents at various competitions, a newspaper clipping from a local paper calling her a pianist to watch. She'd kept them hidden away for years, couldn't bear to look at them, but now she walked over and studied them. That girl in the photos looked so confident, so sure of her place in the world. Lisa barely recognized her, but maybe, just maybe, pieces of that girl were still in there somewhere. Changed, certainly. Scarred, definitely. But not entirely gone. The next morning, Lisa woke up with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. She went to work at the concert hall, did her job, and tried to ignore the looks from co-workers who'd witnessed yesterday's humiliation. During her lunch break, she did something she hadn't done in a very long time. She went online and started researching performance opportunities. Most were way beyond what she could handle now. But then she found something interesting. The concert hall where she worked was hosting its annual community gala in 4 weeks. It was a mixed event. Some professional musicians, some talented amateurs, some local artists. Anyone could apply to perform. Lisa stared at the application form on her screen. Her cursor hovered over it, her heart racing. This was crazy. She wasn't ready. She might never be ready. What if she failed? What if she embarrassed herself worse than Daniel had embarrassed her? But then she thought about something else. What if she didn't try? What if she spent the rest of her life wondering if she still had something left to offer? Her hand was still hovering over the mouse when her supervisor knocked on her office door. Mrs. Patricia Wong was in her 60s, had worked at the concert hall for decades, and had always been kind to Lisa. "Do you have a minute?" Patricia asked, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. Lisa nodded, minimizing the screen quickly. Patricia sat down, studying Lisa's face with those sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. "I wanted to apologize for what happened yesterday with Mr. Richardson. His behavior was unacceptable." "It's okay," Lisa said automatically. "I shouldn't have been playing anyway." "Why not?" Patricia asked simply. The question caught Lisa off guard. I'm just a tuner." "Are you?" Patricia reached into her bag and pulled out a piece of paper. It was old, yellowed at the edges. She unfolded it carefully and placed it on the desk between them. Lisa's breath caught. It was a newspaper article from 8 years ago. There was a photo of a teenage girl receiving an award at an international piano competition. The headline read, "Local Prodigy Takes First Prize." "I recognized you the day you interviewed for this job," Patricia said quietly. "I was at that competition. I heard you play. You were extraordinary." Lisa couldn't speak. She just stared at the article, at that young, confident version of herself. "I've wondered for 3 years why you never said anything," Patricia continued. "Why someone with your talent was tuning pianos instead of playing them. Then I noticed your right hand, how you favor it sometimes, and I started to understand." Tears were burning in Lisa's eyes now. "That person doesn't exist anymore." Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The gala is in 4 weeks. We have 1 performance slot still open. If you want it, it's yours." Lisa looked up, shocked. "I can't. I'm not that good anymore." "Maybe not in the same way," Patricia agreed. "But I've seen you testing pianos when you think no one's watching. You still have something special. Different than before, perhaps, but special nonetheless." She stood up to leave, but paused at the door. "Daniel Richardson is our headline performer at the gala. Just thought you should know." She smiled slightly. "Think about it. No pressure. But I think you have something to say, and maybe it's time you said it." After Patricia left, Lisa sat alone in her small office, staring at that old newspaper clipping. Her younger self stared back, full of dreams and certainty. She thought about her parents, about all they'd sacrificed. She thought about the accident, about the years of hiding. And she thought about Daniel's words. "People like you tune pianos. People like me play them." Maybe it was time to show him and herself that people could be more than one thing. That tragedy didn't have to be the end of the story. Her hand wasn't shaking anymore as she pulled up the application form again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She started filling it out, 1 word at a time, each keystroke feeling like a small act of rebellion against the fear that had held her captive for so long. She had 4 weeks to prepare. 4 weeks to find out if she could still do this. 4 weeks to transform from the person she'd been forced to become back into some version of who she was always meant to be. It terrified her. But for the first time in 5 years, she also felt something else. Hope. The moment Lisa submitted the application, panic set in. What had she just done? 4 weeks suddenly felt like no time at all. She hadn't performed in front of anyone in over 5 years. Her hand still wasn't reliable. And she'd be performing at the same event as Daniel Richardson, the man who'd humiliated her just days ago. She almost went back to withdraw her application. Her finger hovered over the delete button on the email, but then she remembered her mother's words from years ago. Courage isn't about not being scared. It's about being terrified and doing it anyway. So she left the application in place and went home to face her piano. The first week was brutal. Lisa would come home from work every evening, sit at her parents' old piano and try to play. Some days, her right hand cooperated. Other days, it felt like trying to write with her non-dominant hand. Clumsy, frustrating, wrong. She'd play for an hour, then 2, then 3, until her hand cramped so badly she had to stop. She needed to choose a piece to perform. That was harder than she expected. All the pieces she used to play, the ones she'd perfected as a young performer, felt impossible now. They required a level of technical precision her damaged hand simply couldn't deliver anymore. She tried Chopin, but her fingers stumbled over the rapid passages. She tried Mozart, but the delicate control wasn't there. On the 5th night, she sat at the piano feeling defeated. Maybe Daniel had been right. Maybe she was fooling herself. Maybe some doors once closed stayed closed forever. Then she remembered a piece she'd learned when she was 16. Her teacher at the time had assigned it to her, and teenage Lisa had complained that it was too simple, not flashy enough. She wanted to play the pieces that would impress judges and audiences. Her teacher had smiled and said, "Someday you'll understand that the most difficult thing in music isn't playing fast. It's playing with feeling." Lisa had rolled her eyes back then. Now, sitting alone in her apartment, she finally understood what her teacher meant. She started playing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, specifically the first movement. It wasn't the technically demanding third movement that most performers chose to show off with. The first movement was slower, more contemplative. It didn't require the rapid finger work that her hand couldn't manage anymore. But it required something else, something deeper. As she played, something shifted. The notes came out imperfectly. There were small hesitations, moments where her right hand didn't quite do what she wanted. But underneath those imperfections was something she'd never had as a young performer. Back then, she'd played with technical brilliance but without life experience. She'd played about emotions she hadn't really felt yet. Now every note carried weight. The sadness in the piece wasn't abstract anymore. She knew what loss felt like. She knew what it meant to have everything and then have it taken away. She knew about loneliness, about grief, about the long, slow process of putting yourself back together. Her playing wasn't perfect, but it was real. Lisa started practicing every spare moment she had. Before work, she'd play for an hour. During lunch breaks, she'd find an empty practice room in the concert hall and play. After work, she'd come home and play until her hand forced her to stop. Then she'd ice her hand, rest for an hour, and play some more. Her coworkers started to notice. She'd be testing a piano after tuning it, and instead of just playing a few scales, she'd lose herself in the music for a moment before remembering where she was. She'd catch them watching her with curious expressions, but nobody said anything. They probably thought she was just being thorough with her work. Except for Patricia, who would occasionally pass by and smile knowingly. 2 weeks before the gala, Lisa was practicing late at the concert hall. Everyone else had gone home and she'd stayed behind, sitting at the same grand piano where Daniel had mocked her. There was something satisfying about practicing on that exact piano, like she was slowly reclaiming a piece of herself that he'd tried to take away. She was deep into the piece when she heard footsteps. She stopped immediately, her heart jumping. Had security noticed she was still here? Was she going to get in trouble for using the piano after hours? But it wasn't security. It was an older man she recognized, Michael Torres, one of the regular performing pianists at the hall. He was probably in his 70s, had been teaching music for decades, and had a reputation for being incredibly kind. "Please don't stop," he said, walking closer to the stage. "I heard you playing from the hallway. That was beautiful." Lisa felt her face flush. I'm performing at the gala and I was practicing." "You work here, don't you? You're the tuner." He said it not as a dismissal, but as an observation. "May I ask what made you decide to perform?" Lisa hesitated, then figured she had nothing to lose. "Someone told me I shouldn't, that people like me tune pianos and people like him play them." Michael's expression darkened. "Ah, you met Daniel." He shook his head. "That young man has extraordinary talent and an extraordinary ego to match. Ignore him. Some people measure their worth by making others feel small." He gestured to the piano. "May I sit?" Just for a moment? Lisa moved over on the bench and Michael sat beside her. He placed his hands on the keys, old hands weathered and lined but still graceful. He played a few bars of the Moonlight Sonata, the same piece she'd been practicing. You know the story behind this piece? He asked. Beethoven was going deaf when he composed it. Imagine losing the very sense that your entire life's work depends on. He wrote some of his greatest music when he could barely hear it. He played a few more notes. People think music is about perfection. But it's not. It's about truth. It's about taking your experiences, your pain, your joy, everything that makes you human, and translating it into something others can feel. Michael looked at her right hand, resting on her lap. I noticed you favor that hand. An injury? Lisa nodded, not trusting herself to speak. And yet you're brave enough to perform anyway. That takes more courage than playing with two perfect hands ever will. He stood up. Keep practicing. But don't try to be who you were before. Be who you are now. That's always more interesting. After he left, Lisa sat alone at the piano for a long time thinking about his words. She'd been so focused on what she'd lost, on trying to recreate her old abilities, that she hadn't considered that maybe she had something different to offer now, something that could only come from going through what she'd been through. She started playing again, but this time she stopped fighting against her limitations. When her right hand couldn't move as quickly as the piece traditionally required, she slowed down. When certain passages felt forced, she adjusted them. She wasn't trying to play Beethoven the way everyone else played Beethoven. She was playing it the way only she could play it, with all her scars and struggles and survival built into every note. The final week before the gala arrived faster than Lisa expected. Her anxiety grew with each passing day. She'd wake up in the middle of the night, her heart racing, imagining all the ways the performance could go wrong. What if her hand seized up completely? What if she forgot the music? What if people laughed? What if Daniel was right about her? 3 days before the gala, the event program was posted in the concert hall lobby. Lisa found herself standing in front of it, scanning through the list of performers. There were about 15 acts total. Daniel Richardson was, of course, listed as the headline performer, scheduled to play last. His name was in the largest font, with a brief biography mentioning his awards and achievements. Lisa's name was listed near the middle. Lisa Chen, piano. No biography. No credentials. Just her name and her instrument. She was surrounded by other performers. Some professional, some amateur, some somewhere in between. Looking at all those names, she felt small again. Having second thoughts, she turned to find Patricia standing beside her, also looking at the program. Constantly, Lisa admitted. Patricia smiled. Good, that means you care. The performers who worry me are the ones who think they have nothing to prove. She pointed at Daniel's name on the program. You know what I've learned in 30 years of working in concert halls? The most technically perfect performers aren't always the most memorable ones. The ones people remember are the ones who make them feel something. The ones who remind them that music isn't about showing off, it's about connection. But what if I mess up? Lisa asked quietly. What if my hand doesn't cooperate? What if people think I'm not good enough? Then you'll be in good company, Patricia said. Every great performer has had moments of failure. The difference between them and everyone else is that they failed and then got back up and tried again. She turned to look at Lisa directly. You've already survived worse than a bad performance. Don't let fear of judgment stop you now. That night, Lisa practiced one final time at home. She played the Moonlight Sonata all the way through, start to finish. Her right hand cramped twice, forcing her to slow down. There were notes that didn't sound quite right. Moments where her fingers didn't land exactly where they should have. But when she finished, she sat in the silence of her small apartment and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not confidence exactly, but acceptance. She'd done everything she could to prepare. Her performance wouldn't be perfect, but it would be honest. It would be hers. She looked at the photo of her parents on the side table. They'd given up so much for her music career, and she'd spent years feeling like she'd failed them. But maybe there was more than one way to honor their sacrifice. Maybe showing up even when you're scared, even when you're not sure you're ready, even when someone has told you that you don't belong. Maybe that was its own kind of success. The night before the gala, Lisa laid out the simple black dress she planned to wear. It wasn't fancy like what the other performers would probably wear, but it was elegant and comfortable. She wanted to feel like herself up there, not like she was pretending to be someone she wasn't. She set 3 alarms on her phone, even though she knew she probably wouldn't sleep much anyway. Then she sat at her piano one last time, not to practice, but just to put her hands on the keys and remember why she was doing this. Not for Daniel Richardson. Not to prove anything to the people who'd dismissed her. Not even to reclaim her old identity as a prodigy. She was doing this for the girl in those old photographs. For her parents who'd believed in her. For everyone who'd ever been told they weren't good enough. And mostly for herself. For the woman who'd survived losing everything and was finally ready to try again. Tomorrow she would walk onto that stage. Tomorrow she would sit at that piano. And tomorrow she would show everyone, including herself, that broken things could still make beautiful music. She just had to be brave enough to play. The day of the gala arrived with clear skies and a nervous knot in Lisa's stomach that refused to go away. She woke up early even before her alarms went off and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. In just a few hours, she would be performing in front of hundreds of people. The thought made her want to pull the covers over her head and hide, but she didn't. She got up, made herself breakfast even though she wasn't hungry, and went through her morning routine like it was any other day, except it wasn't any other day. Today, everything could change. The gala wasn't until evening, which meant Lisa had an entire day to sit with her anxiety. She tried to distract herself, cleaning her apartment, reading a book, watching television, but nothing worked. Her mind kept drifting back to the performance. Finally, around 2 in the afternoon, she gave up on distractions and went to the concert hall early. The building was buzzing with activity. Stage crew moved equipment, sound technicians tested microphones, and other performers arrived to check in and rehearse. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Lisa checked in at the stage door, received her performer badge, and was told she could use practice room 3 to warm up whenever she was ready. She wasn't ready. She didn't know if she'd ever be ready. Walking through the backstage corridors felt surreal. A few weeks ago, she'd been invisible here, just another staff member doing her job in the background. Now she had a performer badge hanging around her neck, and people nodded at her with the polite acknowledgement they gave to all the artists. She found practice room 3 and locked herself inside. The room was small with just an upright piano, a chair and mirrors on one wall. She sat at the piano but didn't play yet. Her hands were shaking slightly and she needed to calm down first. Taking deep breaths, she tried to remember what Michael had told her. Don't try to be who you were before. Be who you are now. She repeated it like a mantra, letting the words settle over her nervous energy. Finally, she started to play. Her fingers felt stiff at first, but gradually they warmed up. She played through the Moonlight Sonata once, then twice, focusing on the emotional arc of the piece rather than technical perfection. By the 3rd time through, she felt more centered. Not confident exactly, but present, focused. A knock on the door interrupted her 4th run-through. Ms. Chen, 10 minutes until you need to be backstage. 10 minutes. Lisa's heart started racing again. She stood up, stretched her hands, and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back at her looked terrified but determined. Her simple black dress was elegant without being flashy. She'd kept her makeup minimal and her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked like herself, which was all she'd wanted. She left the practice room and made her way to the backstage area. Other performers were there too, some warming up, others chatting nervously. A few looked completely calm, like performing in front of hundreds of people was no big deal. Lisa envied them. Through the gap in the curtains, she could see the audience filing in. The concert hall looked different from this angle. She was used to seeing it empty or from the back during other people's rehearsals. Now it was filling up with well-dressed people, the seats slowly disappearing under a sea of bodies. She estimated at least 500 people, maybe more. Her stomach flipped. First time? A voice asked beside her. Lisa turned to see a young woman, probably in her mid-20s, also dressed for performance. Performing here? Yes, Lisa admitted, me too. I'm so nervous I might throw up, the woman said with a shaky laugh. But at least we're not closing the show, right? That would be even worse. Lisa smiled despite her nerves. True, that honor goes to Daniel Richardson. Oh my God, Daniel Richardson is here. The young woman's eyes went wide. I didn't know he was performing tonight. I love his work. Have you heard him play? Once or twice, Lisa said carefully, not mentioning their encounter. He's very talented. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin. First performer, please stand by. A stage manager's voice cut through the backstage chatter. The show was starting. Lisa watched from the wings as the first performer walked out to applause. It was a violinist, a middle-aged man who played a classical piece beautifully. The audience loved him. Then came a young cellist, then a jazz singer, then a guitarist. Each performance was met with warm applause and appreciation. The performers before her were good. Really good. Lisa felt her confidence draining with each successful act. What was she doing here? These were real musicians, people who performed regularly, who hadn't taken a 5-year break from music. She was just a piano tuner with a damaged hand and a crazy idea that she could somehow be more than that. Lisa Chen, you're next. Please stand by. This was it. There was no backing out now. Lisa moved to the side of the stage, just out of the audience's view. She could hear the current performer finishing up, could hear the applause that followed. The stage manager was gesturing to her, smiling encouragingly. She walked to the edge of the curtain and waited. The master of ceremonies, a charming man in an expensive tuxedo, walked to the center of the stage. Thank you so much. Wasn't that wonderful? And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next performer. On piano, performing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, please give a warm welcome to Lisa Chen. The applause started. It was Lisa's cue to walk out. Her feet felt like they were filled with concrete. For a split second, she thought about turning around and running, just leaving, disappearing back into her safe, invisible life where nobody expected anything from her. But then she thought about her parents, about the sacrifices they'd made, about the girl she used to be and the woman she'd become, about Daniel's cruel words and Patricia's kind ones, about 5 years of hiding and wondering if she'd ever have the courage to try again. She stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, almost blinding after the darkness backstage. The audience was a blur of faces and shapes. The applause continued as she walked across the stage to the grand piano, the same piano she tuned every week, the same piano where Daniel had humiliated her. She sat on the bench, adjusted it slightly, and looked at the keys. Her hands were trembling. She placed them on her lap for a moment, trying to steady herself. In the front row, she spotted Patricia, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. A few rows back, she saw Michael Torres, the elderly pianist who'd given her advice. He was smiling warmly, and then she saw him, Daniel Richardson, sitting in the VIP section looking supremely bored. He was checking his phone, barely paying attention. He probably didn't even remember who she was. To him, she'd just been a forgettable moment, a piano tuner who'd gotten ideas above her station. Looking at him, Lisa felt something shift inside her. She wasn't playing for him. She wasn't playing to prove him wrong, though that might be a nice side effect. She was playing for herself, and for everyone who'd ever been told they weren't good enough. She placed her hands on the keys. The concert hall went completely silent. 500 people, maybe more, all waiting to hear what she would do. Her right hand felt weak, uncertain. The nerve damage was there, as always, a reminder of everything she'd lost. But she also had something she'd never had before. The weight of real experience, real loss, real survival. Those things couldn't be taught in music school. They could only be earned through living. Lisa took one deep breath, closed her eyes for just a moment, and then began to play. The first notes of the Moonlight Sonata floated out into the concert hall, soft and melancholic. They weren't perfect notes. Her right hand wavered slightly, the kind of imperfection that a trained ear would notice immediately, but the emotion behind those notes was unmistakable. She played slowly, deliberately, letting each note breathe. This wasn't the showy, technically brilliant playing of her youth. This was something different, something more honest. Each phrase carried the weight of grief, for her parents, for her lost career, for the version of herself that had died in that car accident, but it also carried hope. The hope that comes after you've survived the worst and realized you're still standing. The hope that broken things can still create beauty. The hope that it's never too late to try again. As she played, something magical happened. The nervousness melted away. The audience disappeared. Even the concert hall seemed to fade. It was just her and the music, having a conversation that had been waiting 5 years to happen. Her damaged hand told the story of her pain. Her left hand told the story of her strength. Together, they told the story of a woman who'd lost everything and was finding her way back. The piece built and swelled, moving through its emotional landscape. There were moments where her hand struggled, where the notes didn't come out exactly as they should. But somehow those imperfections made it more powerful, They made it real. In the audience, people had stopped checking their phones. They'd stopped whispering to their neighbors. They were leaning forward in their seats, drawn in by something they couldn't quite name but could definitely feel. Even Daniel had looked up from his phone. He was staring at the stage now, his expression unreadable but his attention complete. Lisa played the final section, the music gradually softening, becoming quieter and more intimate. She poured everything into these last notes, all her fear, all her courage, all her hope that this moment right here, right now mattered. That she mattered, that her story wasn't over yet. The final note hung in the air, soft and pure, before slowly fading into silence. For a moment, nothing happened. The concert hall was completely still. Lisa sat frozen at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys, not sure if the silence meant she'd failed spectacularly or... Then the applause started. But it wasn't the polite, appreciative applause the other performers had received. This was something else. It started with one person standing, then another. Then suddenly the entire audience was on their feet. The sound was thunderous, overwhelming. Lisa looked up shocked. People weren't just clapping. Some were wiping tears from their eyes. Patricia was standing with her hand over her heart. Michael was applauding with a huge smile on his face. Even the stagehands in the wings were clapping, and in the VIP section, Daniel Richardson stood with everyone else, his face pale, his expression stunned. He wasn't looking bored anymore. He was looking at her like he was seeing her for the first time, like he was finally understanding what he'd missed. Lisa stood up from the piano bench, her legs shaky, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The standing ovation continued, wave after wave of applause washing over her. She'd imagined this moment during her years as a young performer. But back then she'd imagined it differently. Back then she thought success would feel like validation, like proof that she was special. This felt completely different. It felt like being seen, really seen. Not as the prodigy she used to be or the tuner she'd become, but as the whole complicated, imperfect person she actually was. She bowed once, twice, and then quickly walked off stage before the emotions overwhelmed her completely. The moment she was behind the curtain, her knees nearly gave out. A stagehand steadied her arm. "That was incredible," the young woman whispered. "I've worked here for 3 years and I've never seen an audience react like that." Lisa could barely process the words. She made her way to a quiet corner backstage and just stood there, trying to catch her breath. Her right hand was aching. She'd pushed it hard, but it was a good ache. The kind that came from actually using something instead of protecting it. Other performers came up to congratulate her as they passed by. Some were heading on stage for their own performances. Others had already finished. They all said kind things, but Lisa struggled to focus on their words. She felt like she was floating somewhere outside her body, watching everything happen from a distance. Patricia found her about 20 minutes later, still standing in that same corner. The older woman didn't say anything at first, just pulled Lisa into a tight hug. When she finally stepped back, there were tears in her eyes. "Your parents would be so proud," Patricia said quietly. That's when Lisa started crying. Not sad tears, but the kind that come when you've been holding something in for so long that it finally breaks free. Patricia held her hand and let her cry, not trying to stop her or tell her it was okay, just being there. "I need to go freshen up," Lisa finally said, wiping her eyes. "I look like a mess." "You look like someone who just poured their heart out on stage," Patricia corrected. "But yes, go ahead. The reception is starting soon in the main lobby." Lisa found the backstage bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes were red, and her carefully pinned hair had a few strands falling loose. She looked exactly like what she was. Someone who'd just survived something terrifying and come out the other side. She cleaned up as best she could, fixing her makeup and tucking the loose strands back in place. By the time she emerged, the gala had moved into intermission. The lobby was filled with audience members, performers, and donors, all mingling with glasses of wine and small plates of appetizers. Lisa tried to slip through quietly, not wanting to draw attention to herself, but people kept stopping her. Strangers who'd been in the audience wanted to tell her how much her performance had moved them. A woman in her 60s with tears still on her cheeks told Lisa that the music had reminded her of her late husband. A young man said he'd been considering giving up piano lessons, but after hearing her play, he wanted to keep trying. Each conversation felt surreal. These people didn't know her story, didn't know about the accident or the years of hiding. They just knew what they'd felt during those few minutes when she'd played. And somehow that was enough. She was talking to an elderly couple when she saw him approaching through the crowd. Daniel Richardson walking directly toward her with purpose. Lisa's stomach tightened. Part of her wanted to turn and walk away, but she'd already faced her biggest fear tonight. She could face this too. "Excuse me," Daniel said to the couple, his voice polite but firm. "May I have a moment with Ms. Chen?" The couple moved away, and suddenly it was just the two of them standing in the middle of the crowded lobby. Daniel looked different than he had that day he'd humiliated her. Less arrogant, more uncertain. He was holding a glass of wine but hadn't drunk from it. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "What I said to you that day. There's no excuse for it. I was cruel and I was wrong." Lisa waited, not making this easy for him. He deserved to sit with his discomfort. "I've been performing professionally for 15 years, Daniel continued. "I've played in the biggest concert halls in the world. I've won awards, gotten standing ovations, had critics praise my technical skill." He paused, looking down at his glass. "But what you did out there tonight, I've never moved an audience like that. I've never played with that kind of honesty." "Thank you for saying that," Lisa said carefully. "But I didn't perform tonight to prove anything to you." "I know," Daniel said quickly. "And that's what makes it even more remarkable. You weren't trying to impress anyone or show off. You were just real." He met her eyes. "I spend so much time and energy maintaining this image of perfection, making sure every note is technically flawless, that my reputation stays intact. Watching you tonight made me realize I've forgotten why I started playing piano in the first place." Lisa studied his face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like vulnerability. She could stay angry at him, she had every right to. But she also knew what it was like to be trapped by your own limitations, your own fears. "We all get lost sometimes," she said finally. "The important thing is finding your way back." Daniel nodded, seeming relieved that she wasn't going to tear into him. "For what it's worth, I asked around about you after that day. I found out who you used to be, the competitions you won, the performances you gave. And then I found out about your accident." He hesitated. "What happened to you? Losing everything like that and still having the courage to get back on stage. That's more impressive than any technical skill." "It's not about courage," Lisa said. "It's about not letting fear write the end of your story." They talked for a few more minutes. Daniel asked about her hand, about her recovery, about how she'd managed to come back to music. He was genuinely interested, not just being polite. Before he left to prepare for his own performance, he said something that surprised her. "I have a few students I teach privately. One of them is struggling with the pressure of competitions and expectations. Would you ever consider talking to her? I think hearing your story might help." Lisa agreed, exchanging contact information with him. As he walked away, she realized something had shifted. She wasn't that scared piano tuner anymore, the one who'd let his words make her feel small. She was someone who'd faced her fears and discovered she was stronger than she'd thought. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. She watched Daniel's performance. He was technically brilliant, as always, but she noticed something different in his playing. Maybe it was her imagination, but there seemed to be a bit more feeling in it, a bit less showmanship. The audience loved it, giving him a standing ovation as well. After the gala ended, Lisa helped with the cleanup like she always did. Some of the other staff tried to tell her she didn't need to, that she was a performer tonight, but she insisted. This was still her job, still part of who she was. She didn't have to choose between being a piano tuner and being a pianist. She could be both. In the following days, something unexpected happened. Videos of her performance started circulating online. Someone had recorded it on their phone and posted it. Then it got shared and shared again, and suddenly Lisa's performance was going viral. Within a week, she had hundreds of thousands of views. Her inbox filled with messages. Recording companies wanted to talk to her about albums. Concert halls wanted to book her for performances. Music schools wanted her to give masterclasses. It was overwhelming and exciting and terrifying all at once. But the messages that meant the most weren't from industry professionals.